What I want to talk about today is how to evaluate internet sources. So, as I'm sure you're already aware, there's all kinds of information out there on the internet, and some of that is good and some of that is bad. You may have heard the term fake news. Unfortunately, that term is misleading in part because people have misused it. So, fake means exactly that, something that is not real. And some people have nothing better to do than to make articles that look like real news articles and post them to the internet. Almost all fake news is found online, on social media, for example. The news that you see on, say, CNN or Fox is not fake. That being said, it can be biased, right? So we know that Fox has a somewhat conservative bias and CNN has a somewhat liberal bias. So, for instance, if both of those news sources covered a presidential press conference, Fox might talk about the highlights, the good parts of that press conference, and CNN might talk about the ways in which the president stumbled, right? So neither one of those sources would be fake. So we tend to talk about the news that we watch, like the 6 o'clock news, as fake, and that is just not the case. That's misinformation that encourages citizens not to watch actual journalists who have ethics and rules that they have to follow, presenting information to the American people that they don't get because they've been told that that's fake. And so they go to the internet, and the internet is filled with fake information. So let's talk about how to sift through all of that crap on the internet and find something that is good. So if you'll look at the handout in front of you, this should be available in your week 13 module. It's called the Evaluating Web Pages Checklist, and it says do a CRAAP test. And this is just an anagram to help you remember how to evaluate an internet source. The first thing you want to look at is, do you have good coverage? Can you look at the entire article without having to put in your email address or register anything or download a special program to see it? If you have to do anything like that, put in your credit card number, you should run away. There's plenty of really good free stuff online. So let's just look at a sample article, and this is an article that I posted to the Literature Survey Comp 2 course, but it'll work as an example for the Harry Potter course as well. So this is, and I'm all the way at the bottom. This is the article on women and work after World War II. So the first thing that we want to do is see if we have good coverage. Can we look at the entire internet article without having to register or pay or put in our email address or anything like that? So as I'm scrolling through it, I see yes, I can see the whole thing. So check for number one. The next thing you want to look at is relevancy. Is the topic relevant and timely? So is it meaningful to you personally, and is it up-to-date information? So if you're looking at how the aftermath of World War II might have affected women's lives in America, that World War II article would be relevant to you, for example. If you are sort of looking into maybe some Harry Potter fan fiction, and there's an article on the popularity of that kind of fan fiction site, that article might be relevant to you. But you also need to check and see if it's up to date. So what does up to date mean? For internet articles, that means it should be no more than 5 years old. So if there's a publication date, and there isn't always one provided, that publication date should be no older than 2015. If no publication date is provided, you should look for the last update date. This is usually at the very bottom of the website in very small print. It should have been either published in the last 5 years or updated in the last year. So keep that in mind. That's going to be really important to you. Let's look at our sample. So if you look at the sample, you notice that there's not a publication date at the very top. Usually if there is a publication date, it'll be right below the title of the article, and you do not see that here. So we're going to scroll through, look to see if we see a publication date. If it's not at the very top of the article, usually it's at the very end. So here we are at the end and we don't see a publication date there. So then what we need to look for is an update date. As I said before, the update date is usually at the very, very bottom of the screen in small print. So let's scroll. And there it is. In very small print, you'll see it was updated this year. So as long as it's been updated within the last year or published within the last 5, we can consider it relevant and timely. So let's go back to our checklist. The next thing we want to look at is authority. By and large, we want to look for sites that are .edu, those are education sites, .gov, .org, or .net. It's important to note that .gov sites, which are published by the government, are going to be biased in favor of the government, and .org sites are going to generally be biased in favor of whatever information they're trying to promote. So for example, if PETA has a .org site, so People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, if they have an article on eating meat on their website, they may have an article that talks about the dangers or the negative aspects of eating meat, because one of their goals is to get people to stop eating meat, right? So they may not provide both sides of the argument, they may provide a sort of slanted or biased argument. Be aware of that. If you cannot find a .edu, .org, .gov article, or you find a .com that you really like, you want to actually gravitate towards the .coms that are an online newspaper or magazine that also comes out in print. For example, the Hattiesburg American. The Hattiesburg American comes out also in print, so you can use articles from hattiesburgamerican.com. The Huffington Post, for example, is not an appropriate site because they come out only online. They do not have a print version. It's also important to remember that there are some .org sites that are not considered valid sources. Wikipedia, for one. I once wrote a fabulous essay in college. It deserved an A. It got an A-, and it totally upset me. And what did I get the A- for? I used Wikipedia. And my professor took me aside and he said, "This is an amazing essay." He said, "But who told you could use Wikipedia?" And I said, "Another instructor had told me that I could." And he shook his head and just sighed. So you want to be aware of that sort of instructional bias. Your teachers do not want you using Wikipedia, and for good reason, after all. One example I use is that there's an instructor at PRCC who actually had his students post a paragraph of information to Wikipedia. And his students did such a poor job that when Wikipedia found out, they actually banned our IP address. So now if you're on Forest County campus, PRCC, you cannot actually edit Wikipedia sites because of how badly his students did that job. So Wikipedia caught it, which is good, but in between them posting and Wikipedia catching it, people got misinformation. So make sure that you don't use Wikipedia, about.com sites or .org sites that just say like about or answers.org or about.org, that kind of thing. So let's take a look at our sample article again. So if you scroll up to the very top of the screen on our sample article, you'll see the web address, and you'll see it's from PBS. PBS is generally considered a reliable news source in any case, but you'll also see that it's a .org site. So yes, this is a reliable source. All right, let's look at the next thing. All right, we have good coverage. Our article is relevant and timely. It's authoritative. It's a .org site. Now we got to check for accuracy. So sometimes you're reading an article and you know from reading other articles, this information is not correct. So for one, we want to make sure that we gravitate towards articles that we know have correct information. But you also need to look for things like, is the author provided or the publisher provided? So for instance, on our sample article, we know that PBS, the public broadcasting station, is publishing that information on their website. And also, is there contact information? So contact information allows people to email or call the publishers of the website and say, hey, you have misinformation here. This is really necessary. You must have contact links on your website. If you do not, you need to find another source. So let's take a look at our sample. Okay, so when it comes to the contact link, you'll usually find it at the top of the page. You may have to search through some of these links to find it. Or you'll find it, and this is actually more common, at the very bottom of the page in some of that extra information. So let's scroll down to the bottom. And you scroll down to the bottom of the page, and a lot of websites have this extra menu at the bottom of the page, so this is always a good place to scroll down to. You'll see a Contact Us link. So if I click on that, all right, so here I can actually send an email or comments or questions to this link. So if I notice something on their website that is inappropriate or incorrect, I can contact them and tell them, hey, you need to correct this information. This makes them a reliable source. Let's look at our next element. The last item on the checklist is purpose, and this primarily has to do with the topic of advertising. So let's say that you're in the Harry Potter themed course and you found an article online that meets all of the other requirements. But as you're looking at the article, off to the side, you'll see a lot of advertisements for a Harry Potter film or a Harry Potter book or tickets to Harry Potter World at Universal, etc. If you see a lot of ads like that on the topic that you're researching, then we can't expect our source to be reliable because their goal here is obviously to sell stuff. And if that's their goal, then we want to move on. So for our article, this doesn't really necessarily apply, but I want you to be aware of that. It's almost impossible to find internet articles these days that don't have ads on them. But you can find them with limited advertising, and they absolutely should not be advertising for whatever you're researching. So again, if you're researching Harry Potter, they should not be advertising Harry Potter stuff. That's a biased article that you want to shy away from. Okay, so at this point, all of you are going to start practicing your ability to evaluate web pages. So go ahead and complete the next item on your modules list.